welcome all of you to today's webinar, which would be highlighting career insights on financial media. This webinar is jointly hosted by the CFA Institute and the CFA Society of India. I would also take a moment to welcome any of the participating audience who would have joined from elsewhere around the world. So very, very warm welcome to them as well. Just to introduce myself in very, very brief, my name is Kishore Bagri and I am a volunteer at CFA Society in the capacity of director for the past 10 years, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. From a work profile, in a very, very brief couple of lines, I have been into capital markets for the last 22-23 years, spanning across equity analyst, multi-asset fund manager, equity fund manager, wealth management, institutional sales, etc., etc. So, so that would be a brief profile of mine. Just before I introduce the speaker for today, a few basic housekeeping notes. The webinar is scheduled for an hour, and typically we will be breaking it into two parts. 40 to 45 minutes would be the session where the speaker will take you through the various insights as per the topic that we just discussed. And thereafter, we'll have an interactive Q&A session where I will try to curate your questions in the best possible manner and post to the speaker to get a convincing response. So while the session is on, you are free to post your questions in the chat box, which I will curate at my end. The webinar presentation will be available to you after the presentation concludes in the chat box again. And please provide your valuable feedback post the session. Before signing off from the session, we will be providing you a link for providing your feedback. Now, without much ado, let me invite the guest speaker for today and introduce her, Neeti Aggarwal, a charter member, a fellow CFA. Neeti Aggarwal is a senior research and consulting manager currently working for Asian Banker Singapore in a freelance capacity. She has worked for Asian Banker for over 15 years in various capacities and manages the financial technology and banking innovation research practice from a media perspective. She's got over 20 years of experience in research and publication and has authored numerous thought leadership articles and research reports across a spectrum of topics, specializing in typically the banking and technology space, which is her core domain, across Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa. So not just restricted to India, but more broad-based from a geographical perspective. She regularly engages the financial services community on critical transformational issues and speaks and moderates at various events. Previously, she worked as research analyst with the Economic Times. As I mentioned in the beginning, she is herself a CFA charter holder from CFA Institute, US, and MBA Finance from India, and works out of New Delhi. So with that, I hand over the, in today's world, we don't have to hand over the stage, but we need to hand over the screen as such. So Neeti, the screen is yours. Pleasure to hear you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kishore, for that kind introduction and for inviting me to share my thoughts. And thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. So Career Insights is actually quite an interesting initiative by CFA India Society. And as a platform, kind of gives great insight around emerging career opportunities in different segments of the industry. So we'll begin with the presentation now. So can I request Harsha to manage the slides for me? So the next slide, please. So any views and opinion that I share today are totally in my personal capacity. So next slide, please. Okay, so financial media as a sector is not often the top of the mind choice for most CFAs. That said, the sector is very rapidly evolving and offers some very unique opportunities for people with specific skill sets. So in today's session, we will look at following learning outcomes, how financial media is changing shape, what are the key emerging trends, key skill requirements, and what is needed to chart a successful career path in this sector. And so please feel free to raise any questions that you may have during the session, and I'll try and answer them at the end of the presentation. And I'm hoping that this will be an engaging discussion. So, let's look at the next slide, please. So information and media, especially social media news, have become deeply entrenched in our daily lives. So right from the time when we wake up in the morning, what is often the first thing that we do? And it's more often than not is check our phones. So, and we're surrounded by news, information, media in varied forms around us, whether it's notification, news alerts, newspaper, news apps, TV, and the list goes on and on. So we've got a whole range of information sources around us, and they're real-time, immersive, and encompassing. Now, media companies play a key role in information business. Their typical business model is built around information, education, and perhaps also entertainment. But the whole industry dynamics is changing, and these consumer needs are driving this change in the industry, and as well as the transformation across the sector. So as a subset of this industry, financial and business media plays a more crucial role of providing information that can be of value to consumers in decision-making, especially financial decision-making. And to be of value, this information needs to be relevant, accurate, insightful, unbiased, and objective. So let's see what really comprises of financial media. Next slide, please. So classic journalism, or in media, the way we describe journalism is basically researching, reporting, interviewing, and writing around news and for media outlets. Now, as a subset of this sector is financial media, which focuses on information, education, analysis around a wide spectrum of financial areas. And we often refer to them as beats in the industry. Now, these could include financial news, capital markets, financial sector, economy, industry sector, technology, regulations, and probably many more. The common ground being the ability to take complex facts and about these segments of business and provide the information concisely and accurately to the audience. That said, financial media industry is quite diversified, so we've got different organization model for different publishing companies, different media companies. We could have broad financial news focused companies, say newspapers and companies like that, or we could have very focused research companies and media companies on niche segments or sectors. So next slide, please. So 2 decades back, when I started in this industry, we primarily had print and TV media. But today, financial media universe has actually expanded to cover a whole range of delivery of channels. It's siphoned into much more immersive digital mediums like videos, podcasts, YouTubes, social media, real life events. So a variety of channels. And this has resulted in media companies becoming much more digital and much more platform agnostic. The industry has also seen rapid expansion across channels, which every media company is trying to maximize, to maximize its customer reach. Eventually, it is all a game of scale, the customer reach that you are able to gather. And you utilize every channel that is at your disposal. Now, it is vital to meet consumer needs depending where they are and at the time of their choosing and using the channel of their preference. And this means essentially much more of online and mobile devices as of now. But that said, the print is still very much there. It's got a notable presence wherein, and print brings a certain advantages because a consumer tends to devote a dedicated time to a print media, say a newspaper in the morning, for example, at your breakfast table. And hence it attracts a significant attention. It gives you an immersive experience, and therefore it also attracts significant advertisement and promotional revenue. So we'll look at the revenue model later, but let's look at the industry as a whole. Next slide, please. So media sector as a whole has been growing clearly, but COVID-19 kind of brought an unprecedented shock to the industry, especially the print media, which kind of reduced the volumes, accelerated the shift towards digital content, and increased the competition from social media as well as digital channels. So there was a slowdown in ad spend and reallocation to digital media, as well as drop in print circulation. Now, within India, if we look at the sector as a whole, according to Ernst & Young's report, Indian media and entertainment sector kind of grew at over 16% in 2021, and that amounted to almost $21.5 billion. And within this, the biggest share in the industry belongs to TV, followed by digital media, and close behind is the print media. But if we look at the growth rate and as well as the projected growth rate, we see we are projecting a much higher growth rate in digital media, in live events, and not so much in print media. So that's how the channel breakdown is changing in the industry. Now, next slide, please. So let's look at the various revenue streams for media company and how media companies make their profit these days, or the revenue these days. So two biggest source of income for media companies is advertisement and subscription. Now it becomes increasingly challenging for organizations to generate revenue from pure content as information gets increasingly democratized. As a result, most media houses rely on advertisements, on sponsored content, as well as that sponsored content or would include classic ads, branded content, for example, branded case studies. And so there are a variety of models in which sponsored content can be generated. Now, in many companies, typically the ad revenue tends to be of a higher component than the subscription income. But this is not a standard model across the entire industry. There are different organizations with different models depending on their market and strategic differentiation. So take Ken, for example. They're purely subscription based and provide one analytical story a day. On the other hand, we've got ETE, we've got Mint, various other publications that focus much more on ad. The main source of revenue tends to be ad rather than subscription. There are others that offer some free service, some subscription based premium service, and some free service. So there are a variety of models that are existing in the industry. There is also a certain amount of diversification across revenue streams that we are seeing now. So there are product extensions, there are bundling of different extended services. Some media services companies, they've got research wings that provide in-depth analysis, even consulting to a certain extent in niche areas. Then there are some companies have got intelligence wing, or that provides a much more in-depth research. And then there are some companies that provide industry events. So we've got Money 2020, we've got award events, so we've got rankings. So there are newer avenues of making income that are that are kind of evolving over time along with this digitization in the industry. The international practices may also vary across countries. So for example, in UK, the media companies like BBC, they rely much more on ad revenue. And while, as they do not charge their readers, while the model may be different in other countries. So there are different models for different companies. There's also a bundling of products that's happening now. So there may be some companies that are kind of offering a variety of products, whether it's events, whether it's digital content, whether it's a premium service, whether it's subscription service. So they're kind of bundling it all together to increase their revenue. Next slide, please. So now let's look at overall digitization that's happening in the media industry. And I'm going to look at it from 3 different angles. One is how media industry is evolving, and which has happened far more in last, say, 10 to 15 years. The second part is to look at how financial sector has evolved, and therefore that has expanded in the overall coverage of financial sector in media. And third part is what are the expectations of consumers from journalists and how the entire journalism as a profession, how it has evolved. So we'll look at these 3 areas. Next slide. So on a lighter note, this probably may resonate with a lot of us because that's how the media is evolving. You know, everything is getting digitized. The whole the way the shape of media industry has constantly changed in last 10 to 15 years, and much more so during COVID-19. So we've seen an accelerated digitization during this time. Next slide, please. Now, talking about media sector. Now there is democratization of information. The availability of information has become easier, faster, ubiquitous. People expect crisp, concise, and real-time news. Journalists in this digital age must operate in a world where news cycle has moved really fast. As a result, therefore, striking a balance between timely and in-depth reporting, and often to meet this deadlines and speed that is required is often a challenge. The digital consumption has accelerated, which means that, as I was explaining, the channels have evolved. There's technical integration, technology integration within the sector. So the internet has evolved, new capabilities have emerged, real-time delivery of content. There's visual reality through metaverse could probably be our next future. So the whole digital consumption is not only accelerated, it's changing at a fast pace. Then there is also use of technology in user experience and design. So consumers, for example, they've got used to personalized digital content. For example, take an example of Netflix, you know, how it reads into what our personal preferences are, and therefore it offers us that. Now, technologies such as AI is enabling media to personalize news to suit individual customer demands. There's proliferation of social media, and which is eaten into the news business. The new media is interactive, it's immersive, it's user generated. There are streaming apps like Facebook, you know, so that allow allow a person to spread video within minutes. It gains wide audience support within span of few minutes. So that social media expansion is that has changed the shape of media as an industry. And there's lack of regulatory control on veracity of news as well, which is circulated through social media. And therefore, given that scenario, the media company has a big task at its hand because it has to differentiate itself by providing a well-balanced, research, analyzed, and unbiased thought leadership on a topic. Meanwhile, all this change is happening, the cost factor is evolving for the companies as well. So we've got rising newsprints, energy costs, people cost, and all this results in greater cost pressures. So while at one end, we've got more competition, there is pressure on income, and there's also rising costs. So the news cycles have become faster, newsrooms have shrunk. So what effectively it means is the scalability will come through organic and inorganic growth, right? Which would become the route to sustainability going forward. Next slide, please. Now let us look at how financial sector has evolved as on the whole. Now, there was a time when primary coverage of financial sector was around banks, central agencies, regulators, insurance companies. Well, they are evergreen, they still stay. But what has happened now is that the entire spectrum of coverage of financial sector, that has expanded to a whole range of new players. We've got fintech, digital challenger banks, big tech players, P2B players, and these are new entrants that are changing the shape of industry as we know it. There is also sub-segmentation across each vertical as well. So each new player is kind of pushing the industry towards a technology-driven future. And that is also making incumbents move towards technology. So we've got emerging technologies like cloud, open banking, AI, blockchain, Web3, Internet of Things, and many, many more that we hear on a regular basis that are changing the underlying systems for corporates, financial institutions, and as well as publication houses. And at the same time, we're seeing a lot more of mobile first, a lot more focus on wearables, on new devices like virtual reality headsets, smart glasses. So all these are becoming possibly the building blocks of future Web3 or future metaverse, and also the future of financial services as we will see. If we see so much of technology change that is happening in the entire financial sector, this is also going to change the shape of journalism going forward. And we're also, along with that, it's not just the shape of financial sector, we're also seeing there are new business models, new asset classes that are emerging, right? So we've got digital assets, we've got cryptocurrencies, we've got NFTs, we've got central bank digital currencies. So there's a whole range of new asset classes that have come out as well. So when we talk about evolution in the entire financial sector, we need to cover all this in our going forward in our financial coverage as well. Next slide, please. So now, how has financial journalism evolved? What are some of the recent developments? It has become, first of all, it's become much more specialized and segmented. The growth in financial options, financial literacy, and also the need to control finances has increased. And that has led to significant jump in consumer finance related topics. The volume of financial information available to a consumer driven by internet and media option, that has really skyrocketed. We've got Bloomberg, Reuters, CNBC, everyone is giving real-time news feeds today. And what this means is that the pace of news and analysis has escalated. So the daily and weekly publication to real-time analysis across digital channels, that is what is required today. And much faster news cycles, as I was explaining earlier. And then news has got a lot more commoditized. The specialization now for a journalist is in the data, the analysis that they can provide. So the need to be able to comprehend the available vast information that they have and to be able to analyze it with speed and then offer actionable insights, a thought leadership, that is what is required. There is increased global interlinkages, so which has also meant international news appetite, growth in that for consumers. And then there is delivery mechanism of real-time news across variety of channels that we talked about earlier. So let us look at now, what are the skills that are needed when we talk about this variety of change that we're seeing in the industry. What are the skills that a person needs in this sector? Next slide, please. So at its core, journalism is really analysis, information, and a storytelling profession. And the best stories are not always obvious, often it requires research, ability to comprehend and analyze financial implications, forecast and report it accurately. Now, writing and content creation will always remain central tenet to journalism and media. And the best journalists will all have the ability to file a strong story with speed. There is increased specialization and segmentation at one hand. So therefore, we need a more focused research. Yet, one needs to have the ability to handle different channels. That includes like podcast, video dissemination. It's also crucial to have a strong verbal communication ability along with writing skills now. So one cannot just do with one set of delivery mechanism. Now, along with that comes visual infographic skill. So it has to be presented in a much more informative way. You need to create graphics, video backgrounds, illustration, data visualization to supplement the work. And in addition, now the skill has expanded to include a range of digital skills to be able to compile videos, audio, images, graphics into informative, captivating, compact multimedia stories, real-time interviews, video recording, storyboards, video editing. So there's a whole range of skill set required. But of course, the central tenet being the ability to have a strong financial analysis, ability to do a strong research, ability to analyze facts that are there, do a secondary, primary, in-depth research around a topic, understand pros, cons, consequences, impact, variety of factors that could impact the future, and be able to present it in a very crisp format, concise format to your audience. Next slide, please. So when we are talking about different models that we see today, the skill set required also varies. So for example, as I was talking about that, the attention span has gone down. The real-time news capability is what the audience requires now. And as a result, they want bite-sized news. So it's like the news cycle is really fast, which means that the person who, the media personnel will have to be able to do bite-sized news, short news that will have faster turnaround, crisp stories, faster editing. And so it's much more focused around volume of stories rather than depth of stories. Next slide, please. Okay, so now on the other hand, there are articles and there are news reports that are far more detailed. They're long reads. While previous ones that I've talked about were like 1 minute, 2 minute read, these are longer reads, say probably 7 minutes, 10 minutes or whatever, depending on the depth that you're going into. And therefore, they are much more insightful. They're much more in-depth, and they require deeper research and knowledge base along with infographics, charts, layouts. And then it also means that a lot more primary research will go into it, a lot more of interviewing skills, critical analysis, and as well as impact analysis. So that's another type of article. And third, next slide, please. And the next would be a different format, would be around, live video interviews, live webinars, conference, TV reports. So that requires not just research and subject matter expertise, but it also requires a strong camera presence, visual and verbal both. So there are a variety of skill sets that may be required depending on the role that an individual is in. Next slide, please. Now, based on, so it's, while at one end, you do need to have a strong skill set in terms of professional skills that you have, there are certain personality traits that would also make you a better, more equipped, not a better person, but maybe more equipped for the sector as a whole. So let me put it like this. So some of the areas that you would need to look into would be like, do you have the critical ability to analyze information with speed, ability to step back and look at it objectively without bias. So as a media person, the person has a visibility into entire sector, into various different companies in that industry segment, and as to what's happening with each one of them. So you as a person can step back and take a view on the overall industry and take an unbiased view objectively. So that could be that skill could come in very handy. Now you should be able to assess and present various facts around that issue with the cause, the consequences, and potential impact as well. So you need to have the ability to connect dots across the entire industry segment or the niche segment that you're focusing on, evaluate the issue in totality, and then drill down into deeper analysis. On the softer side, you need to have flair to meet new people, networking, interpersonal communication, that's a must actually. Ability to interview people, have very clear opinions and thoughts around a topic. You need to understand it in totality to be able to judge it unbiasedly. Of course, it also means that you need to have very strong ethics as your core ethos, because you sit there and you are able to provide the right objective information without being biased by a variety of factors that impact a person, that impact a journalist today. And most important of all is that one needs to have very strong interest in constant learning. You have to be able to devote time regularly, and you should have that penchant for learning, constant learning. Then that comes purely from self-motivation. So it's the whole the whole profession will require a fair amount of self-motivation and learning to succeed. So next slide, please. Now, in this, while we've talked about variety of skills that are needed, I also want to touch upon some of the challenges that are often seen in this profession, because they impact on how you take up journalism and media as a profession. So as I talked about, so there is faster news cycle. So therefore, time would be a constraint, but you would be required to meet deadlines with speed. Now, ability to differentiate content, analysis, and insights, that could be another thing that is required. So what you present to people cannot be just pure information. It has to be a lot more insightful, a lot more analytical based. You have to be able to look, so that's a common thing that most journalists face, and that's to overlook the hype, the myopic industry view, and evaluate it with a much more holistic perspective. Emerge as a think tank, thought leader. And, sometimes it's like the time pressure would make it difficult to dig deeper into the information sources. There is need to create a hook for the audience. There are commercial interests at play as well. So all these factors need to be managed. There is managing ethics, transparency, and accountability while meeting the commercial pressures. So these are some of the common challenges that come with the profession, but that makes it even more interesting as well. So media can be a very interesting profession, and so it's got various flavors attached to it. Now, the huge volume of detailed analysis has led to also segmented beat system, because normally a media professional would be focusing on certain specific segment or beat, because they tend to have a stronger network, then they tend to have a deeper knowledge in that segment. But it also sometimes leads to a silo mentality, where it's difficult to connect dots together across different issues and media and sectors. So therefore, you need to be able to connect dots and get out of that silo mentality and evaluate a perspective in totality. Then there is also social media, which means every news item or every media is totally entrenched with social media. And therefore, that means real-time response across social media as well. And then you need to be channel agnostic, as I explained earlier. The audience spectrum has also increased, right? So the whole, you need to be able to address the needs of diversified set of audience. And some of them may be, like, for example, traders, very sophisticated investors, while you may have a layman totally who is not aware of anything. So in that, so your spectrum is very wide, and you need to cater to each one of them. And one other challenge is often to keep pace with the fast-paced technology changes across the entire economy, entire sector, entire financial sector, as well as how it is impacting media sector. And therefore, the need to continuously reskill to meet the evolving demands. Next slide, please. So now, why a career in financial media? So the most important factor is, I know, so I'm going to take it a little fast from here. I know we have limited time and we can't go into too much depth, but why a career in financial media? The ability to make a difference, the ability to present news, findings, and it can be a very strong motivator to act as a watchdog, informant, and educator. Being associated with media house tends to give you recognition, brand, and also certain semblance of media power. You get opportunity to interact with and learn from senior executives in the industry. And then you have opportunity to cover a wide spectrum of topics. So each day is different. There's constant learning, innovation, and meeting new people. Next slide, please. Now, it's a rapidly growing space. Now, what sets you apart as a CFA would be really your knowledge base in finance, having strong analytical skills, strong understanding of finance, financial instrument, financial markets, financial knowledge, along with the experience and continuous learning that is in core of CFA, that really helps them to stand apart. They're also able to understand and analyze the issue critically. So that is very handy. It's to be predictive and prescriptive in your analysis. The work is academically rigorous, and that's ingrained to CFAs. And then qualification of journalists matters. CFAs can give you an edge compared to the next candidates. And CFA qualification is very well recognized in the industry. And also it provides you with a strong network. Next slide, please. Now, the roles and responsibilities in financial media, they vary according to different types of roles. So we've got content creation, which is which ranges from journalist, writing, and it's often focused on specific segments, or and a subset could also be research analyst, advisor, sector specialist. And then along with that, we've got, and that involves largely to be able to interpret data and corroborate information. Then along with that, the next level would be editing, different types of editing roles that you may have, more focused towards news editing, languages, publishing of content. And that's normally more for a little more experienced journalists. And then moving on to the bigger role across as chief editors, sector editors. And on the other hand, you also have managerial roles, which range from functions from strategy to business development. Next slide, please. So media companies generally tend to be flat and lean structure. For instance, in a newspaper company, reporters, writers, analysts, senior writers, they normally follow a segment and they report to a specific editor for that segment, and who in turn reports to either city editor or a chief editor. But obviously this organization structure varies vastly from business model of the company, as well as the type of company it is in. Next slide, please. Now, what are some of the typical qualifications sought? Now, media, as I was saying, it's not a top of the mind choice. And that's because there are people from the varied education qualification that come into media as a sector as well. So we often see degree in journalism, degree in management, economics, postgraduate. So basically, from variety of qualifications, people come into this sector. For financial market, equity, financial planning kind of roles, definitely CFA would give you an edge. For editors, you would need a proven experience as journalists, as reporters, a portfolio of published articles. Then you also need certain amount of computer proficiency, excellent communication and networking skills, as I talked about. So variety of qualifications that you need, as well as skill set to succeed here. Next slide, please. Now, how does one enter into this segment, and what is the typical hiring process? So at the early or entry level, we see normally writing test is one of the areas that I've seen a lot of media companies, they tend to have a written test. Then along with that, they have interviews, and the written test normally focuses around language and grammar capability, ability to understand and analyze the topic, ability to present the findings, financial understanding, financial analysis capability, computational, even economic analysis proficiency. So it again depends on the role to role, but normally these are the type of qualifications that one may assess in the written test. The interviews can be multi-level depending on the role. The experience and reference checks are common requirements. And for higher level roles, it may be routed through an executive search firm. Depends on company's process. Normally, the recruitment process would start with an advertisement followed by application selection, experience assessment. For junior and mid-level would be a written test along with written interview rounds and then final selection. Next slide, please. Now, the compensation package also varies highly across media houses, brands, and different types of roles. So there is no fixed standards. Normally, very well-known media brands may not necessarily be the best paymaster. It's just very varies. So I've just taken some ballpark figures from one of the platform that shares this information. Normally at a senior role, after good experience and industry recognition, one can command a significantly high compensation and opportunities can be plenty. There are also options for flexible hours, freelance opportunities once you establish in the industry. So variety of models as well as compensation options exist. Next slide, please. So we've looked at the entire how the media sector has evolved. What are the skill sets that are required? What is the hiring process? And what is the overall way in which the qualifications, the pattern and the model in a media agency? One other area that I want to talk about is what are some of the growth paths, or what are some of the emerging opportunities that could be seen in this industry going forward? So, after working for certain years in this industry, you tend to have greater segmentation and specialization in the industry. And that can give you an expertise to be a valuable resource in terms of becoming an influencer, or to be able to become a research expert in this area. And this includes opportunities in adjacent sectors like research, rating agencies, consulting, commentators, influencers. So once you develop that kind of an expertise, it also opens, on the other hand, for example, for general media executives, you could be going on the other side of the table and be part of corporate communications, investor relations, or even in the industry, on the communication sides in the industry. There are hybrid business models also. Remote working is breaking down the hierarchies. So there are new waves of editors and that are embracing more positive and diverse agendas. There are new tools emerging. There's new technology that is emerging. The consumers are making new demands, and that is enabling the sector in a different way. So we've seen entire coverage of how the tech as a sector has changed. Digital channels are getting optimized. AI, for example, it's being used to automate recommendation. Now, on the other hand, it's also being used in the media companies, for example, tagging of content, assisted subbing, interview transcription, automating the content that is presented to consumers. So there's a whole range of usage of technology within media sector. And then there are newer areas such as Web3, Metaverse. Now, we see the Metaverse coming up. So the interviews being done in Metaverse, maybe that's the future. Collaborative virtual platforms, 3D avatars. So who knows how that is going to change the way we look at information, the way we look at the news that is presented to us, or education that is presented to us. So overall, in a nutshell, the industry is really evolving. There's an accelerated digitization. The opportunities are plenty. The future of digital media will evolve as new tools emerge. Consumers make new demands, and the quality and accessibility of technologies improve. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation. Over to you, Kishore.
Thank you so much, Neeti, for the wonderful session, which was very, very enriching, enlightening, and educative. Particularly, even after spending a reasonable amount of time in the industry with all those gray hairs, I still have not got bored. So that's the only saving grace here. But most of the investment background people have hardly looked at financial media in that perspective, as you have laid out in a very, very lucid manner. A lot of notions that kind of are inbuilt or ingrained amongst the investment community regarding financial media or media as such, or per se, it's more of a reporting job. And hardly very few people appreciate, and before today's session and listening to your in-depth examples and illustrations, it was an eye-opener in real sense that so much of research, analysis, assessment is involved in financial media career roles as well, which most of investment professionals may not have thought in those lines. So with that, on that note, I'll just like to kick off the Q&A session with a couple of questions that triggered my mind while listening to you. But before that, I'd just like to request to the audience, if you can continue to post your questions on the Q&A box, which I would curate and post to Neeti once I have had my share of time. So given the fact that a lot of technological advancement has been happening, and in the investment functions that we traditionally or for recent past that we have been performing, a lot of opportunity does not come in terms of tracking the way a lot of technology is getting entrenched in financial and banking circles, etc., etc. Maybe because there are not much investment opportunities, and therefore by the time investment community starts looking at it and grasping the changing scenarios, it falls onto the media personnel or financial media, to be very precise, and to kind of get involved in the latest evolvement around that segment, which typically a lot of research and investment who are very, very focused on investment may not be able to look upon so early at the evolution stage. So if you could throw some light around this aspect.
Certainly. And thanks, Kishore. I'm glad that people did not doze off in my presentation. I was fearing that because it was a long monologue. But okay, so you raised a couple of very important points, pertinent points, and that's around the integration of technology with financial media. And frankly, it has happened across all arms of financial sector, and not just investment, but yes, definitely in investments as well. So we've got this whole range of, say, for example, robo-advisors. We've got robo-advisor and AI is a technology that has become embedded into investments as a sector. Then we've also got specialized arm of fintech, which is into wealth investments, wealth advisory, and investment focused fintechs, for example. So there's a whole range of technology ingrainment that is happening in financial and investment sector. And now, taking a step back here, what it means is that in our day-to-day life, we may not be aware of this if we are not using that technology. But where the financial media plays a big role is to be able to bring out these developments in forefront in the industry. People get to know exactly what's happening, what is that is emerging, what are the trends that are coming out. And therefore, as I mentioned, the role of information, education, analysis, and perhaps entertainment. So I would add entertainment also because without, it does tend to add a new flavor in your life from a boring monotony, right? So media brings to light a lot of new developments that are happening in the industry, in the financial technology space, especially. So we've got actually a lot of niche segments that have come up, niche media players. So I can think of many right now, like take, for example, some that are focused purely on technology. For example, Finextra, I remember it's focused much more around technology focus. There are specific media companies that talk about how technology is getting ingrained into financial sector. There are a lot of research houses that are looking especially around financial technology as a sector. So there's a whole range of technology developments that we need to talk about, and that is going to drive the future. So it becomes essential to talk about, and that's what media is doing. I see a lot of them taking lead in that.
Thanks, Neeti. So basically, like we have sector analysts in a typical investment kind of approach, be it sell side or buy side for that matter. Even in media, high skilled, deep analytical aspects are required to cover and cater and report and research and publish on all these emanating and evolving developments, which otherwise will take a lot of time for people to get aware about. Right?
Yeah, so there are different roles, like I was talking about. There are some companies, media companies, that are much more focused around reporting, as you also mentioned, right? So there are very small bite-sized news apps that are just talking about pure reporting. And you don't need those analytical skills there. It's much more of the initial bias you talked about, that people tend to think that's a reporting job. That's a fact for certain amount of media companies. But on the other hand, there are media companies that are far more focused into analysis, into sector research, whether it's into capital market, into investment, or into specific business research. And therefore, you need a lot more analysis there, and specialists as well.
Before I move on to another aspect, a request to all the participants, there is a pop-up about feedback which must have come on your screens. A humble request to please provide your feedback so that the society and the institute could take cues from there in curating better and more enriching sessions for all of you in future. So moving to a similar but at the same time a bit intertwined topic. Now, with so much of new asset classes, new instruments, new investment avenues which keep coming up from time to time, and the latest craze over the past couple of years, I particularly say couple of years simply because that has become very proliferative in the last couple of years, cryptocurrencies, though it has been there for some time, but at a mass level of the society, post-COVID, it became kind of very proliferative in that sense. Now again, when these kind of new avenues emerge, it is the media which needs or is the only option to kind of dwell into what is there and do in-depth research and provide the larger society, the investment community, and the masses at large as to what actually it is all about, and bring what do you call validated information / research / insights / inputs, etc., etc., etc. So in that sense, this all does provide opportunities which traditional investment functions may not provide, by getting involved into something which is very cutting edge, very new, unknown, and where one has the opportunity to bring that to the world. So your thoughts on that kind of a
yes,
intellectual trigger that it might provide?
Certainly. So, I mean, talking about my experience, the way I have seen, for me, it's been a constant learning. Every day I'm learning something new because there's so much of development that is happening in the industry. You took example of cryptocurrencies, and of course, like cryptocurrency, digital assets, central bank digital currencies. We are seeing a constant evolution in terms of new asset classes that are coming up, new developments in the industry. And therefore, it's very difficult for an individual to keep pace with all this if they do not get access to right information, right analysis, and to know, and that has to come from a trustworthy source, frankly. So there is a lot of content, as I said, in social media. You've got enough of blogs and, social activists and blogs and experts who are writing. But often people tend to take things with a pinch of salt because you don't know how trustworthy or how analyzed this information is. And that's where the role of media becomes very important, because you're able to bring out these facts, these industry events, and you have to analyze it from a different perspective. You don't look at it from pure, okay, this is something new that has come up with. You need to look at it from in terms of what is the impact going to be, how are regulators looking at it, what's happening in a country X and what's happening in country Y, what are the global linkages, what happens when a new technology comes up, and how does that impact the earlier asset classes that we had, where will the money flow? So you need to connect a variety of dots and be able to provide that kind of an analysis. And that's just one example. So that ways, financial media covers a whole lot of sectors, right? So you may have, in a similar way, different subspecializations, and therefore to be able to bring in forefront that kind of analysis, that plays a key role. Yes, if we can do that. There's, of course, as I mentioned, a lot of challenges. We always have numerous constraints to be able to do that, commercial as well as time, as well as the depth that we can go into. So if we can overcome those challenges, yes, it plays a big role.
Yeah, so one of the questions from the audience, and I will just mix it up with a couple of thoughts that I was already wanting to ask. So sensationalization, that's something which is, I would say, second word which can be used about media. Very placid or practically no oversight of regulation, no accountability as such in terms of what is being reported and how true or untrue it is, what kind of impact or losses or profit it creates to the consumer as such. When I mean, just to, I mean, since you are having a very, very curious facial expression, so I'll just try to rephrase the same. One of the TV channels, let's say, comes, flashes one news. Veracity may or may not be known. The impact is a knee-jerk reaction in that, based on that particular flash. After 10 minutes, an apology pop-up can be given. Sorry, it was erroneous. Now, for a lot of people, the damage would have already got done, right? So just combining the question again, I was just setting the context. So sensationalization, hardly any regulatory oversight, not much accountability in that aspect. So how do you look at these aspects? I know you said one has to create that differentiation from a trust point of view. You need to create that brand where people, when say that it is coming from this particular media name, has that particular background which has gone into it before they have come out and said something or published something. A lot of hard work, due diligence, in-depth analysis has been done before bringing it up for consumption. But we all know that these kind of issues are not rare, but quite prevalent. So what's your take on this aspect of this whole media?
Okay. Now, there are multiple layers to this, okay? Now, at the onset, the first thing I want to say is that I cannot and I'm not entitled to comment on the entire media sector, right? So there are aspects of media sector that are known to everyone. When I talk about sensationalism, when I talk about hype, or when you talk about that there is absolutely no accountability and no regulatory control, I would, or absolutely no accountability in terms of what they present, I would tend to differ a bit, primarily because that is what the role of media is, to be able to present fact to individual. So I'm not here to comment who's doing what a media or what a TV channel is doing or what a newspaper is writing. But normally we expect media channels, and I would say that a good media channel, a good media company would present facts to you, which you can trust. So take Wall Street Journal, take Financial Times, take Economic Times, take Economist. There are a variety of examples of financial media that we look up to in terms of information that they provide us. I'm not saying that everything is totally true or everything. There is certain amount of journalistic bias, or there is certain amount of opinion that comes into in form of any article. So that is always there. When you talk about damage that a media does, well, I would just say this, that there is, as I was talking about that when I was talking about why a career in media, there is a certain amount of power, media power as we call it. But the fact is that you have to use that power correctly. You have to provide the right information. At my first slide, I said the information has to be accurate, has to be unbiased, objective, relevant, and insightful. So that is how I started the whole presentation with, and I think that in a nutshell is what is required. So essential for any media company.
One of the questions from the audience is, for a fresher, now with so much of information overload, we are in an era of information overload. I mean, circa 25, 30 years back, getting access to annual report was an effort. And we are in the today's times where we are inundated with information, we get drowned with information.
Yes.
And I think the skill today is to know how to thought the information as compared to how to gather the information, which was the case 30 years back. So in this world that we live in, now if someone, a fresher, wants to start and let's say wants to get into this financial media, doing something on one's own, are there any avenues or choices or options that you can throw light on?
Sure. So you mean in terms of doing something of their own as in their own venture?
Yeah, I guess so. That is the understanding that I got from the question.
Okay.
To start out
So,
independently would mean that, I presume.
Yes. So the easiest form, as I said, as in there is a lot of information available, like you said. You know, when I joined, I remember when I joined Economic Times in late 90s. The Google was just coming, you know, at that time. The internet was just evolving. In that time, we used to have those whole range of newspaper clippings, whole range of annual reports that we need to go through to actually assess information. So that has totally changed now. What we have, the information that we have at our disposal is far more vast. So therefore, now coming back to the question about what could one do if not, frankly, telling you, frankly, if given an opportunity, it would be good to work for some time in an organization, gather certain amount of experience around how around the writing articles, doing analysis, doing write-ups, coverage of news, building networks, and also it would really help if one gathers some experience. However, for whatever reason, if that is not an option, the other way to do that would be that you try and develop something like maybe blogs of your own or become an influencer of your own after kind of getting a stronger knowledge base into something. But that would again mean that you have to do a lot more of in-depth research on your own, and you're able to provide a differentiated information, differentiated analysis to your audience. And that's the only way. You have to come forth with something that is unique, that you are able to provide to your audience, and that can only come through either in-depth research or through experience.
Yeah, I don't have too many questions from the audience. So audience, this is your last chance to post any questions. In the next 2 minutes, while I'll try to ask something from my side. And till that time, if there are any questions, I'll take that up. Rest, else we'll just wrap it up. So now that the audience is typically CFA qualified, charter pending, or at the final stage of their third level, or maybe like that. So that is the typical audience here. Yeah. So the financial / the domain capability is kind of established from a qualification or background sense.
Yes.
So now, in your opinion, what other aspects or traits are more relevant or important for a career in financial media vis-a-vis traditional investment industry?
Okay, that's a good question. So it's a given, you're CFA. So it's a given that you have financial knowledge. You've got expertise in terms of analysis. You've got very strong understanding of economy, around business practices, around accounts and everything. So that is given, and that is what your strong point is. But as I was mentioning, that along with that all this will give you good analytical skills, good knowledge base. But along with that, you will also need good communication skills. You will also need good writing skills. if you're into print media or content creation side, if you're into research focused media, then again, I mean, any form of media you go, eventually it is the delivery that you're providing to your audience. And that has to be good, right? That has to be differentiated. You need to be able to provide certain amount of thought leadership to be able to stand out. And you need to provide that in a format that is very appealing to audience. And therefore your communication skills, your interpersonal skills will matter a lot. So your language skills will matter a lot. So along with your financial knowledge and your CFA skills, I think that kind of will become crucial. Your storytelling, as I was talking about, your storytelling skills will also be very important when you are presenting information that is appealing to your audience.
Well, thank you so much, Neeti, for taking out time and sharing your valuable insights. It was really very enthralling and enriching, and I'm sure the audience would have taken away a lot of new perspective, which they may not have come across. I definitely have got quite a fresh perspective of financial media, which I had not thought in that sense, even after so many years. So with that, very grateful for you to have taken time out for addressing our candidate base, member base, etc. So again, thanks a lot from the Institute and Society.
Thanks, Kishore. And I myself really enjoyed the session. It was fun to do that. And I hope, and I want to wish good luck to everyone who's attended the session.
To the audience, for those who are members, you can log on to your portals, CFA portals, and get PL credits for attending this session. We do have upcoming sessions for different kind of career progressions, career paths. So I would definitely recommend for participating in that and registering in those sessions as well. So just on your screen, you can see the upcoming session details. So practitioners insight. So this is more technical and domain specific, which is valuation drivers from, again, one of our members, Seshadri Sen, who is head of research at Alchemy Capital Management. This is on upcoming 23rd of this month, 23rd June, which is a Thursday. So that is from 5:30 to 6:30. And I think we have another session again lined up, which is, I just saw one of the sessions which I think we have. So on 7th July, we have again a session on ESG investing. ESG has become quite vogue and very trending in social media parlance. So that there is a session on ESG which is lined up on 7th of July. So please register for that as well. So with that, we come to the end of today's session, and I wish everyone a very good evening, and I hope that you all had a very insightful time today, getting a lot of perspective and insights into what financial media as a career is all about, and the various aspects and the whole gamut of it, which was very lucidly presented by Neeti. So just before I log off, once again, I would like to thank Neeti for taking her time out in enlightening us on this particular aspect. With that, thank you all and wish you a very good evening. With that, we wrap up the session. Good evening, everyone.